This is Resonance 104.4 FM. Flipping marvellous. How you doing? I'm Nick Hennigan, and it's time for another slice of Literary London, where we talk about things, well, kind of literary and Londony. It's in the name, really, isn't it? Also, an extra treat, if you're watching on bohemianbritain.com or on YouTube, we're live. I'm waving at you right now. And so too is my guest for this slice of Literary London, Nick Brom. Do you prefer Nick or Nicholas?
Oh, doesn't matter. Nick's fine.
Nick, with the two Nicks. Yeah, I used to do a radio show with the two Nicks. But yes, Nicholas Bromley, who's a writer, and I met him down a pub. Yes, I know. But it was a pub theatre. It was the Tabard Pub Theatre. And Nick Bromley, who I also, of course, you will have heard if you've listened to previous editions of this programme, you will have heard him on the Chiswick Book Festival, talking about his books there, and we're going to talk about those today. So you've written two books, Nick. I'm greedy. One is called Theatre Law, and the other is called Stage Ghosts and Haunted Theatres. There indeed. If you're watching now in glorious stereo, you can see that's the copy of Theatre Law. I like the kind of traditional look to the cover as well.
Yes, and then Stage Ghosts and Haunted Theatres.
I'll be quiet so people can see that as well. Brilliant. So, I mean, they're great books. I mean, we'll talk about the books
later
in a mo, but just talk about yourself first. So because you've been involved in theatre for quite a while.
Well, yes. Actually, I started off in 1964 when I was at Central. Before it became Royal, before they gave it a title, it was just the plain old Central School of Speech and Drama, and I did the stage management course. And in the holidays, I'd work backstage at Richmond Theatre, which is close to here, in the crew as one of the crew. In fact, there were only two of us anyway. So, and it was weekly rep then. And they'd build the sets on the side in an old lean-to, which is on the side of the building. It's all been terribly smartened up now, but it was a glorious learning experience, mostly because you had to play knuckle with the other crew. So I've got a rather large left hand still to this day, and then finished
knuckle being a game, of course.
Okay. Oh yes, knuckle the game, and then I went out into rep at Malvern then, where was my first professional job as an ASM, and then when that season ended, joined the tour of My Fair Lady, which had just started, come out of the out of Drury Lane. This is in '65, and then about a year and a half later, I got my first job in London when I had my full equity card. You know, you had to have a full equity card to work in the West End in those days. But I did the weeks and got the card, and then came in as an ASM to London with 3 shows. And then after that, this is very long-winded, but then I went to South Africa because in those days, ASMs and DSMs were, as you know, they were much older than they are today, and it took an awful long time to rise through the ranks because people stayed doing what they did. And I got the chance to go out as a stage manager to South Africa. And again, so that sort of jumped the DSM part of the job.
Just to clear up for people that don't know. So ASM is assistant stage manager, yep. And DSM is called deputy stage manager, which is kind of higher than stage manager, isn't it? It's a little bit of a strange system, is it?
Yes, I'm sorry, I should have explained. And so you cue the show. The DSM is the one who stands in the corner, and if an actor dries and asks for a cue, quite often says, which one do you want? I mean, it could be disaster. But it was a great experience, and it did all sorts, everything from one-man shows to big variety shows to straight plays to musicals. So it was 2 years of solidly different and terrific variety of shows, which was great experience. So when I got back, I was able to present myself as a stage manager, and in those days you didn't really have stage managers on their own. They were more, you became a company stage manager until big musicals started. So not until the 1980s were the two jobs split in half. When that happened, then I became a company manager, because by then I was doing musicals.
And a company manager is sort of the producer's representative, so you won't necessarily be at the corner of the stage calling the show, but you'll be responsible for looking after the whole company and paying the wages in those days.
It's
literally like the producer's representative of the show, which is quite a big gig, I would imagine, quite a responsibility.
Oh, a terrific responsibility. Because in the early days, back then, there was all sorts of problems with. We had the 3-day week, and for example, the lights would go out halfway through a show, and you'd be left with just a single bulb, one bulb. And then the other thing, of course, then was the IRA were very active, and they would phone and say, "There's something in your theatre," and you'd have to evacuate, bring it back, and sometimes you would have to possibly cancel because you couldn't find anything, but the police would tell you, because there was a coded message used to be sent out, whether it was true or not. That was quite. You had to have the responsibility, and then if something went wrong again, like the set broke down, if it was on a revolve or something, you'd have to make a decision after a little bit of time whether the show could actually continue, or would you have to take another hour to clean it, to sort it out, and do a full cancellation of the evening and a refund for people. So all those little things like that, you had to make the decision, especially when you couldn't get through to the producers, who in those days there were no mobile phones. You had a number, you could call them, but if they'd gone out, it was your call.
Yeah, I do remember actually how answer phones. It sounds really update that. Answer phones kind of changed my life when I was freelancing and producing and doing events. You could actually, because before that you had to have a secretary or someone to answer the phone for you if you weren't there. It's a kind of another world now, isn't it? Really,
it's another world. Yeah.
And you've had some great adventures, I suppose. What was it that got you into the theatre? Some of the names you're coming out.
Why did I join? Why does anybody join? I mean,
what was it? Were your parents particularly theatrical?
Yes,
living in London at the time.
Yes, on my mother's side, of the family, I had a couple of cousins who were actors. My mother was a dancer. My aunt was a casting director and an actress, and she was married to an actor. So and my grandmother was very keen. She'd push the girls onto the stage when they were 12. They didn't go to school. They went to a dancing. Well, they went to a dancing academy, and they were working at the age of 14, 12, from the age of 12 onwards, and then in the West End from about the age of 15. They were at the Kew Theatre down at Kew, the old Kew Theatre, which was at Kew, by Kew Bridge. Yeah,
brilliant. And that obviously influenced you as a small child then, growing up.
Well, I knew quite a lot of what was going on and what sort of life it was. So I wouldn't say I was starry-eyed, but I knew that I thought there is there is a career here, if one can be so. It's such a posh word for being in the theatre, but there was a career there. And if I have a very bad memory for words, for remembering words, as it were. So I thought I'll never be a silent, silent plays are just not in fashion. I couldn't speak French or mime French like Marcel Marceau. So I thought I'll become a stage manager, because it seemed to me that there'd be more work possibly for a stage manager than an actor, and that's what I did.
So you weren't moved to be an actor then, particularly? That wasn't the passion?
Not really, no. Not really. No.
It's great. I mean, we know, don't we, that a good stage manager is worth their weight in gold, really. That must have been so. Your parents, presumably, when you were younger, were all okay about you going into the theatre?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yes, I mean, and the great thing then was, but if you went to a drama school in those days, you didn't have to pay. You got a grant from the council, so that was an enormous help. Because these days, I know it is very, very expensive because it's now been linked with universities. So you end up with you end up with a BA, but it's an expensive it's an expensive form of degree.
Yes, it's slightly. I mean, my partner, she got in just as the last grants were being given in the 90s. Yeah. But had it not been for that, she wouldn't have been able to have gone to drama school. She's done quite well for herself since then, I have to say. Yes, I'm not a great fan of these degrees. That might just me being old. I doubt it. I'm Nick Hennigan. This is Resonance 104.4 FM. We're also on bohemianbritain.com in Vision. Oh, well, waving. Attitude now in stereo, you'll be able to see me waving. I'm talking to Nicholas Bromley, who is, as you can probably tell, has been steeped in theatre for many years. We met at the Tabard Theatre, which is in Chiswick in West London, and I'm very fond of that, mainly because the people that have just taken it over now, Simon Riley, who used to manage it for a few years, or for quite a few years, and then he left, and he's actually now got the lease. I'm very fond of that. How do you find? I mean, you're working in the West End. We're going to talk about the books, I promise. No. Two books: Theatre Law and Stage Ghosts and Haunted Theatres. But how do you, having worked in theatre for such a long time, and having worked overseas, and mainly you've been playing your trade in the West End, how do you think the business looks upon small studio theatres like the Tabard or the Hen and Chicks or the White Bear?
I think they're terribly important because because so many theatres have disappeared now. When you consider how many theatres there were at the turn of last century, say 1900, so many theatres have gone. So many regional theatres are in trouble. Little theatres, if they don't get grants, they don't get, they rely on local audiences mostly, and I think they're very important because they quite often give a young person or anybody their first experience of going to the theatre, and they also put on some very good shows. London now has a lot of small theatres, and the standard is very high. You get some excellent performances. You get some excellent new plays being done there. And I believe you're putting on a new play there pretty soon.
Well, it just so happens, yes. We are. It's not a new play so much, but it's a new version with Maverick. Maverick's always been about that. And it's interesting to say that we started pub theatre in Birmingham back in the 90s after my one-man Henry V, which, if you're looking, there's a poster behind, actually, if you're watching.
I can see it. Yes.
I did that in 92 and went to Edinburgh and was blown away because I had no idea what Edinburgh was about, or even fringe theatre. And then we started offering, basically inviting people to try theatre in Birmingham, which fortunately managed to work quite well. And a lot of people that were working with us, we go first-time directors and actors before, have gone on since to do great work. I won't embarrass too many of them by mentioning them by name, but there are quite a few people, both front and behind the cloth, as it were, front stage and back stage, that have gone on to do it. And I guess that's an important part as well, particularly as we were saying, if your only other option is to try and do a theatre degree, the practicalities of getting involved hands-on with theatre must be important at that level.
Yes. And it's a very crowded profession. Theatre really is a crowded profession, and with the demise of the rep system, it's, as you said, it's very hard to get the experience, which the hands-on experience, which a young actor or a young stage manager needs to understand the ins and outs of the business. And studio theatres give you that chance.
How did you find the weekly rep system? This is me being a bit of an anorak. So I actually toured with I put on a show about Tony Hancock called Hancock's Finest Hour. And it starred Paul Henry, who was known for playing Benny in Crossroads years ago. Yeah. And he talked with some affection about, he didn't do weekly rep. I think he did, was it twice weekly rep? Great way of learning a trade.
Twice weekly. I mean, that was really the norm. I'm just going to turn off my phone. Sorry, I think it might be.
No, it's okay. We can't hear anything.
I think it was usually, I think there were more fortnightly reps than weekly reps, but they still do weekly reps. There are one or two on the East Coast. I think Frinton has one which does weekly, and there's one down in Dorset or Devon, which Barnstable. Is it Barnstable? Oh, something up there. Oh, that's Sue. Sorry, I still do it, and it's. I mean, when the only time I did it was at Richmond, and of course we were actually spent most of the day canvassing flats, and, or regurgitating flats. So
that doesn't just to clear it up. That doesn't mean walking around selling political parties in apartments.
Canvassing flats, yes.
The flats are the wooden structures that you put canvas on to create a scene.
Yep. Yes, and painting over again and again and again, painting them over, making up, the glue and making up the paint itself, powdered paint you'd use, and it was so by the time rehearsals were over, because by about 4 of the afternoon, because they had a show that night, so they were rehearsing the next week during the day, and then doing the show in the evening. So it was pretty full on for the actors, pretty full on.
Yeah, I guess that's probably one of the reasons why it changed, perhaps. Yes. Yeah. And so we come to the books. Hooray, not just one, but 2 books. So what made you, I mean, obviously you've been in theatre for a while. It's your career. Yeah. I would argue it's your passion. I suppose you have to have a bit of passion for this business, really, if you're going to for any sort of longevity and having to put up with the financial, I mean, as you said quite rightly, it's such a crowded market. So many people want to be in it. It means that it's actually quite tough to get proper gigs, as it were, or paying gigs. He said, "I'm just about to cast this two by Jim Cartwright for the casting notice is going out tonight. Please get in touch if you'd like to."
He's going to.
He's really big. But it's a tough old game. So, but you obviously do have a passion for it. So where did the idea for the books?
First, my first one which is called Theatre Law, which is this one. There's a drawing on the back, and it's by a dear friend of mine called Simon Bond, who sadly is dead. But it's quite appropriate in a way because he wrote 101 Uses of a Dead Cat. So now he's a dead author. But he suggested that I thought I'll do a backstage dictionary, basically. So it's an A to Z of all the expressions and all the things in the business. For example, bravo. That's what audiences are meant to shout at the end of a dramatic evening in appreciation of a dramatic evening. I even think I've heard it myself a few times in my career, but that could be balls. Anyway, it's like that, it's Iago, one of the greatest enigmatic villains of all time. Iago destroys Othello, but why? His behavior is uncannily like some of today's theatre critics. Anyway, it's like that. Simon did all the cartoons. There's a cartoon for every page. So
you have to show us some now, and you can see this if you're listening.
There's a Bacardi Breezer, you see, Bacardi Breezer under B, Bacardi Breezers. sneered at by more spirited drinkers and abhorred by the moral minority, this lively good time brand of alcopops is nevertheless admired by many of your average theatre audiences. It is also very useful to have a few in the fridge backstage when working on younger shows such as Grease, High School Musical, and Matilda, to dish out as rewards, bribes, or payback.
Brilliant. Yes, I know somebody that worked on Matilda, and I think you're right there. Yeah. And it must have been quite. I mean, we have a lot of writers that follow us. And by the way, I should say, if you'd like to get in touch at any point, you can do. Email's probably easiest, as always. radio@mavericktheatre.co.uk. radio@mavericktheatre.co.uk. We're on Twitter, I think, at London.
Oh, really? Oh.
But I'm on Twitter anyway, Nick Hennigan, if you want to get at Nick Hennigan. I know, HENNEGAN. I used to have 10,000 followers. I got hacked. Anyway, that's
a lot. Wow.
I got hacked. But so if you'd like to get in touch, of course, if you're organising an event or you've written a book or you're involved in anything to do with literature in London, or in this case, theatre. And then the process. Well, no, let's talk about stage ghosts and haunted theatres first as well. So
yes.
tell us how that came about.
Well, that came about through a lifelong interest in ghosts from a very early age. And I suppose ghosts are a curious subject. They're very hard to prove, but equally hard to disprove. And I think I've been fortunate enough to have had some very strange experiences, and I'm not talking about in the green room afterwards, but I mean just in real life, in real time, in theatres. And I have seen and experienced some strange, very strange phenomena. And I thought I would, before I became a ghost myself, I thought I'd write a book about not many, a mere 50 of our haunted theatres in the British Isles. And that's what it's about. So it's a tour. It goes on tour. It starts in London, and then so we have 21 London theatres. Then there's an interval because you'll be tired after that, you know. So we have a little interval with single stories, and then an entr'acte in Totnes, and then it goes on tour again. It goes out on tour, having played its London run, and we start off at the Adelina Patti Theatre in Wales. And then after the Theatre Royal Margate, we do 17 out-of-town ones. We come back to Sadler's Wells and to the Theatre Royal Drury Lane for the grand finale. And that's the that's the running order of the book.
That sounds like a very good tour, well-organised tour. Obviously, they have a good company manager involved in it. Yeah. So how did you decide are they all theatres that you've been to?
They're either theatres I've visited, or I've spent many years sort of gathering the material and reading about them and talking to people. And they're some of the best ones, and quite a few of them are not known to the public. So we've got several, in fact, many are unknown to the public. I mean, the famous ones, such as the Man in Grey at Drury Lane, that of course is known and is regularly put out by the press when they need a story.
Tell us about the Man in Grey.
The Man in Grey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. I haven't seen the Man in Grey myself, but I know people who have. But there are other ghosts at Drury Lane as well. In fact, there's a lot of ghosts at Drury Lane.
The most ghostly theatre, perhaps?
They're out there, and they're you know, you may be sitting next to one. You never know, do you? At the theatre.
It's true. You never know. Look left, look right.
Because they don't just stay backstage. You know, ghosts have been seen in the auditorium during the show, in the fly gallery, sitting in the audience, sitting in the dress circle, being on stage even. You know, they've appeared on stage.
Wow.
So there's a lot of story there. I'm doing a talk, funnily enough, at the Tabard on March the 30th about haunted theatres. We're doing a little talk there. We thought that might be quite fun. So I'm going to to be illustrated not by ghosts, because there's about 2 or 3 photographs of ghosts. Very few, and always someone says, "Is it for real? Is it for?" There's a lot of controversy about it, but what I've done is illustrate the people who have appeared in various theatres, so it will be about them. Yeah,
brilliant. And of course, yes, that's 30th of March 2022, because
March,
the
yes.
podcast is around for a long time. Oh yes, we're like something that you can't get rid of. And so what was the process of writing as well? Because we have a lot of writers that listen to this. Did you use a particular sort of program, or was it just a laptop, or did you do it longhand? What's your writing
No,
process?
I did it on a laptop. I did them both on laptops, because being a company manager, I needed one for doing show reports and salaries and things like that. So I thought I'd tap away as the show played, and I did.
Yeah. So did you use any special program, or was it just like a word processing?
No, just Word, Windows,
Yeah.
and then sent it off and had it put together, as it were, and illustrated.
And have you self-published them then?
I did, yes. I've done them both. I've done them both. Yeah,
well,
but not through one of the companies. I've done it myself under my own banner.
Yes, it's not vanity publishing as we used to call it. There's the self-publishing.
I don't think so, because you see, if you do vanity publisher, you only get about 10 copies of the book. You have to buy the rest.
Yeah.
So,
we've got a couple. In fact, we're bringing out another one called Plays in the Pub. Would you believe? Which I'm going to mention now.
Are you publishing it yourself then?
Yes, we are. We're doing it through a print-on-demand system, and I've done a thing about called The Making of a Ghost of a Chance. Oh, there's a ghost.
Oh, there we are.
A diary of running a small-scale theatre company with a famous soap star, a famous director, and a little boy and very little money. And that's coming out in time for 2. In fact, if you're around in April, come to the Tabard Theatre and see 2.
Because your show 2 is coming. Your show 2. Yes, of course.
Exactly. And we're going to be sort of saying about, we could talk forever, but tempus fugit, as they say.
There's one I'd like to mention, actually. Yeah. It's quite interesting, because Simon has, as you said, has taken over. And he's programming really well. I mean, a great variety of shows. I mean, and one of the ones he does, apart from putting on your shows running for 3 weeks.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. But he's done quite a few one-nighters, and he's got one which was very interesting. I saw the one with Sian Phillips and Stephen Greif, which was on quite recently, and he's also got one called I've written it down because it intrigues me, because I'm going to go and see it. Posting Letters to the Moon, which is on the 12th of March, and that's got Simon Williams and Lucy Fleming. Now, Simon Williams, a lot of the ladies will go a little bit weak at the knees, probably, of Simon Williams. He was in all sorts of wonderful shows on television, and it's about Lucy's mother and father, who were Peter Fleming, who was Ian Fleming's brother, and Celia Johnson of
course, yes, of Celia Johnson,
Brief Encounter fame.
Wow.
The letters they wrote to each other during the war while Peter was abroad on service, and it's a very charming show, apparently.
We can find out details of that at the theatre at the tabard.org, I think, is the website. When can we find more about you, Nick? Have you got a website? Have you got
no, LNP Books. L for lucky, N for naughty, and P for professional books.
That's a great name, Lucky Naughty Professional. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time, Nick. It's been fascinating. If you'd like LNP Books, it's Nicholas Bromley, Theatre Law and Stage Ghosts and Haunted Theatres. And that's it. We've run out of time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.
I shall see you next time. You can catch us on bohemianbritain.com. We're also on YouTube. Can't remember the channel, but bohemianbritain.com. And of course, on Resonance 104.4 FM.